stories, accounts, and content presented here are works of fiction or alleged narratives. Any resemblance to real events, persons, or situations is purely coincidental. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. Whether they are living or deceased, this content is intended solely for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not meant to glorify, promote, endorse, or encourage any form of illegal or criminal activity. The creator does not condone, engage in, or support any illegal behavior in any way. Everything shared is either pure fiction or based exclusively on publicly available records and information. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Fed by Fire. Thank you guys for being here. I'm Christian Whitlow, fresh off of work, and I wanted to come kick it with y'all. And today, I want to talk about something very close to my heart. I want to talk about the homies who never made it out, because believe me, I almost didn't either. There was a time in my life when I was so deep into addiction and everything that comes with it that I honestly thought that I'd be dead before any consequences ever caught up with me. You know, even one time I'm convicted of this, so I can talk about it. I sold to an informant because I figured, none of it mattered. In my mind, I wasn't going to live long enough to see the indictment anyway, and I was wrong. I sure did get to see those consequences, but it helped build a better me. And I remember being around people who had completely accepted death as part of an everyday life. And somebody, would hear that another user had, OD'd and died. And instead of being scared, the first thing that they would ask, damn, where can we get some of that? And, that's how twisted addiction can be. And how twisted addiction gets, death stops being something that you fear and starts becoming something that you expect. And when I look back at the people who were in my circle, most of them are gone. Most of them fell into three categories: they're dead, they're in prison, or they got clean. Or there's a fourth category, they're still at it. There really aren't many other endings. I can't think of any. I remember, one OD I had where, I was hanging out in a room full of people, who, had warrants and were wanted by the police, and I went down hard. They hit me with 4 Narcans, 4 times. And, when that didn't seem like enough, thankfully they made the call and left because, they were worried about being picked up. But I respect that they didn't leave me for dead. But I woke up, getting CPR from a first responder. And I can still remember opening my eyes sick as fuck, being told that I could either go to the hospital or that they were searching the room and I was going to be charged with everything in there. And that's where my life was. Not thinking about a future, not thinking about, my family, not thinking about purpose, just surviving one more day. And that's what a lot of us, are doing. And one thing people don't understand about addiction is that, ODs aren't always caused by someone, trying to die. A lot of times, it's arrogance. When you use every day, you convince yourself that you're in control, that, you're invincible. You think you know your limits. You think, you've seen everything. Then one day you get something that's just a little stronger than the last one, and that's it. That's all she wrote. You get some of that fire and it's over. I've watched it happen more times. I've saved more people's lives than I can count. I had a homie, die sitting at a table with his head down, and, people thought he was just sleeping until they realized that he wasn't breathing. And, I've watched families get destroyed over these kinds of things. I've known mothers who just, couldn't afford to bury their own children, had no life insurance, no savings, nothing, nothing. They had to make a GoFundMe to pay for the funeral. And that's a sad, sad scene. I've seen kids grow up without dads, and I've seen grandparents raising children because of exactly what I'm talking about. We are an entire generation that got swallowed by addiction. And that's what it is at the end of the day. And these stories, aren't unique to any of you, I'm sure, to where I came from. This is happening all over America in real time, from the Rust Belt to the South, from small towns to big cities. Everybody is being affected. Drive through any city, drive through enough places, and you start seeing the same story. A single parent household, a town where work left a long time ago. Maybe, there's a fucking Walmart to work at, or a Dollar General, or a gas station. But other than that, there is no other type of, opportunity. You know, as a kid, all you see is people struggling, and everybody's stressed, everybody's broke, everybody feels trapped. You look around and you think, I want out of this. I want to be anywhere else but here. And I know that feeling. A lot of us grew up, where our parents were fighting their own battles. As long as you weren't causing trouble, nobody paid much attention. But the little kids you see with dirty feet running around the trailer park in diapers, those kids eventually grow up. Some make it out and some don't. It's just a sad story we keep seeing on repeat. And if you were anything like me, you wanted something better, and that's part of why, I thought having a kid at 17 was going to fix everything. I wanted to build that family dynamic I never had. Not to say they did anything bad. My father's great, my mom's great. I wanted a home though, with two loving parents. I wanted stability, I wanted purpose. But I was still carrying all the same habits, all the same anger, all the same selfishness, and all the same denial. And that is what, eventually was my downfall. My life for years, like so many opportunities had passed me by and I pissed them away. For a long time, I thought that's just how addiction was, and I thought that's who I was. I thought the anger was just a part of me as my skin. I thought the chaos was, that's what I was. And those bad decisions defined me as a person. But they didn't. And, they were part of my story, part of making me who I am today, not the end. And today, after everything I've been through, after all of those overdoses, arrests, the funerals, the broken relationships, the burned bridges, and the years that I can never get back, I finally have everything I always wanted. I have a family, I have a home, I have people who love me, and, I have purpose. Not because I got lucky, not because, but because I finally started doing the simple things first every day. Recovery doesn't happen all at once. We all know that. It happens one decision at a time, one better choice at a time, brush your teeth, just go see your kids. So this video is for the homies who never made it out. RIP to all y'all, to the ones buried too young, to the ones sitting in prison cells, to the ones still fighting their own demons that nobody else can see. And it's also around here, we talk about where we came from, we talk about where we're going, and even the most broken stories can still have a very different ending. If you or somebody is struggling with addiction, do me a favor and call 1-800-662-HELP. 4357 for help, and reach out to your local treatment provider. And remember that recovery is possible. Jesus is King. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.